Hello everyone, I am the Bandit Kirby. Welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a commander chosen by viewers in a recent poll, Kadena Slinking Sorcerer. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel at no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with the logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Kadena is a 3/3 Naga wizard for 1 generic, 1 black, 1 green, and 1 blue. She has a static ability that makes your first face-down spell cost 3 less to cast. Fortunately, this also includes recent cards with the disguise ability, as well as the past Morph and Mega Morph cards. Since they all cast 3 generic to cast face down, that first one is free. Her triggered ability happens whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield. Whenever it does, we draw a card. To say that Kadena is designed to helm a Morph deck is an understatement. Since her first ability is only once per turn, we can make the most of it thanks to cards like Leyline of Anticipation, giving flash to all of our spells. You can also include cards like Vidalcan Orrery, but I found that just the Leyline is good enough for the deck. Well, running something like Alchemist's Refuge is also good since it gives your spells flash while not taking up a land slot in the deck. You do have to pay and tap it, but at least you can do it once and when your opponents least expect it, just like the sneaky and ambitious Kadena likes. Alright, so let's get all of the face down creatures out of the way. The deck's running 20 of them, which is a decent enough ratio, especially when we need slots for other key things commander decks need. Fortunately, Kadena is in the colors for some of the best morph creatures. First up are Kadena Silencer, Stratus Dancer, Void Mage Apprentice, Willbender, and Keru's Spell Snatcher. These all provide some form of control elements when turned face up. Kadena Silencer counters all abilities on the stack that your opponents control. This is absolutely busted when there are a lot of triggers on the stack, or if someone activates a problematic ability. The other day, I countered a Planeswalker ultimate with this. Super evil. Stratus Dancer is essentially anti-board wipe tech since all of them are instants or sorceries, but it can also deal with single target removal spells as well as other counter spells. Same with Willbender, since turning it face up can change the target of a spell or ability. Void Mage Apprentice and Keru's Spell Snatcher can counter any spell, with the Spell Snatcher having the added bonus of exiling it, then letting you cast it for free whenever you want. It does cost 2 more to do, but is amazing. All this being said, the deck is still running Fierce Guardianship, An Offer You Can't Refuse, and Swan Song because you'll still need non-synergistic ways to interact with opponents, especially in a creature-heavy deck like this one, which tend to be weak against board wipes. Continuing with interaction, we have Exit Specialist, Ice Feather Aven, and Echo Tracer. All of these bounce creatures, which is great at either bouncing the biggest threat on the board, swinging at us, or even protecting our own creatures in response to a board wipe. So these have double use. New one on the list is Exit Specialist, which has Disguise instead of Morph. You can still cast it for free the first time with Kadena, and then it has Ward 2 while in play. So good. As for protecting our board, the deck is still running cards like Heroic Intervention, Golgari Charm, and Rapid Vigor. Again, for important aspects of deck construction such as interaction, you need to have non-synergistic and efficient ways to go about it. About Golgari Charm in particular, it's used mostly for regeneration, but can also be used as a 1/1 token board wipe or enchantment removal, which makes it an amazing catch-all spell in this deck. Gift of Doom is another interactive morph spell even though it's not a creature. That's because if cast for its morph cost, it's a colorless, subtypeless creature spell on the stack as it enters the battlefield. Then, without using the stack, we can turn it face up to attach it to a creature in response to it getting destroyed. This has saved a key creature too many times to count. Again, the deck is still running stuff like Giant's Amulet, Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm, but those are a bit telegraphed. Gift of Doom is instant speed protection that is unexpected. Yes, it goes away as an aura if the creature leaves the battlefield, which is why equipment are still better, but there's a satisfaction of activating your trap cards that come from playing with morph creatures. Inox Survivalist and Nantuko Vigilante provide even more interaction. These are essentially naturalized effects when turned face up. There are plenty of annoying artifacts and enchantments in Commander, so these do some work, especially for the same cost as Disenchant. Their only downside is not hitting everything, but that's okay because that's what Assassin's Trophy and Beast Within are for. Same philosophy as before. The goal is use and reuse morph creatures for value, but running instant speed interaction in your deck is almost a requirement. Last but not least in the interaction department are Bane of the Living and Thousand Winds. The first one is an emergency use only morph creature because it hits everything, even itself. Our board is mostly 2/2 face down creatures, so if we're using this to get rid of bigger threats, we will lose our own creatures. But desperate times call for desperate measures, so it's in here. The second one also hits our creatures if any of them manage to be tapped when we turn it face up. However, this saves us when facing an alpha strike, so long as our attackers don't have vigilance. That being said, bouncing our own things can be useful, especially if they've already been turned face up, because we can then recast them face down again. Cyclonic Rift and Evacuation are also included for the same reason. Granted, we can't bounce our own things with Cyclonic Rift, but we can wipe the board before swinging in with our own Alpha Strike. Using either in response to a huge mass of creatures coming our way is also a smart thing to do. Crystal Shard and Tamer Sabertooth also help us bounce creatures, albeit one at a time. If we have no other morph creature to play face down, we could just bounce one and then cast it in order to get advantage. Or we could do that to sort of reset it in order to morph it again later on. Or we can just use it to protect our creatures by bouncing them. The sky's the limit with how you use these cards, especially Crystal Shard if an opponent happens to be tapped out. Den Protector and Monastery Lore Master are included in order to reliably recover any of these previously mentioned instants back to our hand. The amount of times I've been able to morph either of these creatures to get back an Evacuation, Fierce Guardianship, Heroic Intervention, etc. is too many to count. Don't forget to put these into your deck. Same with Mystic Sanctuary. While this top deck stat instant or sorcery, you can still draw into it with the deck's card advantage effects, which we'll see soon, especially with the fetch lands. 4 of these get Mystic Sanctuary onto the battlefield from our library, which we can do in response to drawing a card for that pro gamer move. Fathom Seer isn't really anything to write home about since it just draws us 2 cards. However, it morphs for free by bouncing 2 islands to our hand, and it just so happens that Mystic Sanctuary is an island. So this also helps us bounce it if we had to reuse it again. That might seem a bit niche, but we're still drawing 2 cards off of it. Print Lifter Ooze is possibly one of the most busted creatures in the entire deck. Another one of the new cards for Kadena, this makes it so you don't have to worry about putting big creatures into your deck. Each time you morph any of your creatures, you create a 0/0 Ooze token with Trample with as many +1/+1 counters as other creatures you have. This literally won me the game the other night. I was able to create oozes out of nowhere for blocks and then have at the ready for attacks. Things get out of hand very quickly thanks to this gooey dude. Weaver of Lies is another one of the synergistic morph creatures in the deck and one of the most important ones. Turning it face up allows us to turn any number of creatures with morph abilities face down. This lets us reuse morph abilities. However, it's not the only one in the deck to do this, but we'll see those effects in a bit. It's important to note that Mark Rosewater makes a distinction between Morph and Disguise. While Morph and a Megamorph will work with Weaver of Lies, Disguise will not. So Weaver of Lies will not turn creatures with Disguise face down, only those with Morph and a Megamorph. Lastly, Branch of Vitu-Ghazi and Zoetic Carbon are 2 morph creatures that don't take up spell slots in the deck. Drawing these mid to late game means having a creature to trigger all your things, and getting them early game means using them for the mana. So if you're missing your land drops, use these as lands and not creatures. Now that we saw what all the deck's morph creatures are, how do we make the most of them? Well, apart from Weaver of Lies, the deck has plenty of ways to turn our face-up creatures face down again. Illithid Harvester and Ixidron get the job done. Ixidron is a classic, shutting down all of opponents' creatures while resetting our morph creatures. Easily one of the best cards in the deck. Illithid Harvester, another relatively recent card post-Commander 2019, does something similar but only to tapped creatures. Fortunately, you can send it on an adventure first to ensure the creatures you want to turn face down are tapped before you cast it. Since those creatures are also tapped for an extra turn, you can also use this to Alpha Strike someone out of the game too. Eudora Gravegardener is the absolute best one though, since you can do this repeatedly. Eudora is so amazing that you can even have a mono green morph deck with just that as your commander, as can be seen in the previous episode of the Brewery, link up here in the corner. In any case, whenever a non-token creature we control dies, it returns face down as a forest. This will not trigger Kadena or other effects for face down creatures since they're not entering as face down creatures, they're entering as forests. However, since they're still face down, you can turn them face up for their morph, megamorph, and disguise costs. So we can reset our face down creatures by sending them into combat, blocking with them, or sacrificing them. Phyrexian Tower and High Market do just that. Sacrifice a face up creature at instant speed so that it can return face down as a forest and then you can morph them again. I've used this trick so many times and it's not easy to deal with since the sacrifice effects are on lands. As long as you protect Eudora, you're set. Atrata Deadly Fugitive and Ixidor Reality Sculptor are included for those creatures that are either too expensive to turn face up, or to prevent any non-morphing creature getting turned face down. So these 2 creatures do an insane amount of work. Super happy for Atrata since it's basically another Ixidor for the deck. This helps us deal with non-morph creatures turning face down because of Ixidron or Eudora. Speaking of turning face down creatures without morph face up, the Cyber Controller, Death in Heaven, and Cyber Ship are more new fun cards for Kadena. These actually steal from your opponents and they enter the battlefield under our control as face down creatures that are 2/2 artifacts called Cybermen. Unless our opponents were also playing Morph, Megamorph, and Disguise creatures, we would not be able to turn them face up. But if we had Etrada or Ixidor, we would be able to. The synergy is insane. Don't sleep on these cards if you're planning on an updated Kadena deck. Not only that, but Death in Heaven is amazing tech against graveyard strategies, so even its floor is amazing. Illusionary Mask, Scroll of Fate, and Vanifar Evolved Enigma help us with getting more face-down creatures onto our battlefield, regardless if they have morph abilities or not. The Mask is one of my favorite cards from back in the day. And while its latest reprint was the price gouging Magic 30th edition, you can still get a relatively cheap version thanks to the Collector's edition. In any case, the Mask helps you cast your creatures as face-down creatures so long as you're paying their mana cost. But that creature will turn face up if it were to deal or receive damage, or if it becomes tapped. So it's possible for you to bypass quote-unquote morph costs, or just turning it face up altogether. Vanifar can do this for free, but at the beginning of combat on your turn. Or, if you'd rather pump your colorless creatures, you can instead put a +1/+1 counter on all of your colorless creatures. Scroll of Fate is the best one of these three though, since you can do it at instant speed. This will help you get any triggers at instant speed as well as having your morph creature at the ready to deal with anything. Such an amazing card here. Ugin's Mastery also gets us free face-down creatures. Another new card, whenever we cast a colorless creature, we manifest the top card of our library, essentially getting us 2 face-down creatures. This enchantment does a ton of work in this deck. Definitely don't sleep on it. Panoptic Projector is another all-star in the deck, not only because we can tap it to essentially cast a free face-down creature, but because it doubles the triggers when we turn things face up. This card is absolute insanity. The deck has a ton of effects that trigger when we turn creatures face up, but this will also count the creature itself turning face up. Absolute insanity. Speaking of helping cast creatures face down, Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, Ancient Tomb, and Soul Ring help cover most of the costs if we wanted to get more than one per turn, since Kadena gets the first one for free. If you're worried about the damage part from Ancient Tomb, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth can help you out. The deck is mostly green and blue, so this helps out a ton, especially with fetch lands if we have nothing left to fetch for. For this one, you can also run the art card version, which is the one I use. Hey, art cards are just borderless, techless, full art promos of Magic cards, and this one's pretty easy to remember what it does. While turning morph creatures face down multiple times gets us more value out of them, there are more ways of getting value from them. Yes, we draw cards off of Kadena, but what else can we do? Well, how about some spicy tech that I'm proud of figuring out? For that, I present Volo Guide to Monsters. Since face-down creature spells do not have names nor creature subtypes, then every time you cast a face-down creature, it will trigger Volo. You will then get a 2/2 colorless, nameless, subtypeless creature token without any abilities. The tokens can be used to chump block, overwhelm the board once you get the boon effects in play, etc. And if you did manage to cast any creature which you don't have the subtype for in play, you get a copy of it anyways. I'm pretty proud of how I use Volo for morph decks. We can also ramp thanks to Trail of Mystery. The deck doesn't have many basic lands, only 2 of each snow-covered basic land, but each time a face-down creature enters the battlefield, we can get a basic land into our hand. It might not go to the battlefield, but it helps us not miss land drops. For ramp per se, we obviously have Farseek, Nature's Lore, 3 Visits into the North, and Rampant Growth, of which the first 4 have the potential of getting us multi-type lands into the battlefield. The deck isn't too mana hungry, but we do want to be able to morph our face-down creatures with little stress. Besides our commander, Secret Plans, and a Feta Runecaster also help us draw cards via face-down creatures, only that these permanents do so whenever we turn a creature face up. These have the potential of drawing us into a ton of cards. As a bonus, Secret Plans adds 1 toughness to our face-down creatures, which makes us not trade after Ixidron enters the battlefield. Beast Whisperer and the Great Henge are also included for the same reason, but these trigger regardless if the creature was face down or not. As a bonus, the Great Henge also puts a +1/+1 counter on that creature if it was non-token. We can also tap it for double green. Unfortunately, while this card has skyrocketed in price, the good news is that it is not necessary for the deck to function. The deck still draws so many cards that Reliquary Tower, Thought Vessel, and Decanter of Endless Water are included to help us keep our hand. These cards are also good on their own and don't affect the deck that much, even though it's 3-colored. Forsaken Monument is another way to help pump our face-down creatures since it gives colorless creatures we control +2/+2. Not only that, but anything we tap for colorless mana gives us an extra colorless mana, which is amazing for Soul Ring, Ancient Tomb, and Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, making it even easier to cast more face-down creatures per turn. And on top of all of that, we gain 2 life whenever we cast a colorless spell. This card is so good here. Archetype of Finality and Akroma's Memorial are some more boons for our creatures. While I'm not running any big and scary morph creatures, they're all interactive, which is helpful in the long run. However, in order to win via combat damage, pumping our creatures is a good way to go about it. And the combination of First Strike plus Death Touch and Vigilance to keep them as blockers is a good way to deter attacks as well as blocks, unless you have lethal on board. I played a game recently when in response to blocks, I turned the archetype face up because it was previously manifested. I love these types of decks that keep opponents on their toes while also giving you fun things to do. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. Apart from all of the previously mentioned lands, the deck's running all 3 Shock lands, all 3 Snow Duels, Zagoth Triome, Reflecting Pool, and Command Tower. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Kadena Slinking Sorcerer. Since Commander 2019, we've gotten a ton of new toys for morph decks like this one. Plenty of new cards with Manifest, Murders at Karloff Manor gave us more face-down shenanigans via Disguise and Cloak, the Doctor Who precons gave us the Cybermen mechanic, among other niche cards here and there. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. Again, that deck list being what I'm currently running in real life. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. A special thanks to those who voted for this video. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Darren Kirby, and happy brewing.